And data from another research firm, Canalys, confirms the trend, with Xiaomi's China market share at 15.2%, followed by Huawei at 14.7%, and Apple third with 12.5%. All right, joining us from Los Angeles to discuss Apple's market share in China and Apple's prospects in general is tech expert Eric Shiffer. He's also the CEO of Patriarch Equity. Eric, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Michelle.
So, Eric, overall, the Chinese smartphone market grew by around 3.4% last year. That is the slowest rate to date. Do you think it's nearing saturation point?
I think it is. I think we're getting to that point, and especially, with these high-end phones, unfortunately, that's really the end of the market.
Well, Eric, the lower tier cities is where the experts say there are the biggest growth opportunities in China. There are about 600 of these smaller cities. Though, to put it in perspective, some of them are in fact bigger than many European capitals. But how is Apple poised to compete against Oppo or Vivo or Xiaomi in these lower tier markets?
Well, I think Apple is really, poised to compete. But the question is, what is the real size of this market? And that's a question mark in terms of what people are going to spend. I think that Apple is going to slow down in China. I don't think that you're going to see the same kind of growth. Yes, they're going to penetrate some of these smaller cities, but you also have some great Chinese competitors. And that's the real problem for Apple, with Xiaomi and some of the other ones who have great products. And I think they're going to make some significant inroads into what Apple has traditionally been dominating.
Well, Eric, for the most part, everywhere else, Apple enjoys and benefits from tremendous brand loyalty. iPhone users are unlikely to switch, and Apple does keep it all in the Apple universe. But this hasn't been the case in China. A Chinese consumer that has an iPhone won't necessarily get an iPad. Chinese device users are notoriously fickle. Why is that? And then how can Apple build brand loyalty in China?
Well, I think the Chinese consumer is a practical consumer. They're looking for the best, but they're also looking for price. So they're going to match things up. They will look at the specs on different technology, and if the specs aren't good, forget about it. So I think that that's a problem for Apple, as many of these competitors are matching them on specs. In fact, in some cases, Michelle, they're superseding them on specs, and that's really the driver. So the Chinese consumer, astute, smart, practical, looking at everything, not just the branding of a specific company.
Well, Eric, if price is the big factor here, do you see Apple joining in and competing in the price wars, cutting its prices?
No, I don't, not significantly. So if you're saying, are they going to go in on the low end? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to risk their brand. I don't think that they would put themselves in that kind of position. It's possible, but I think the odds are against it. So really what they're going after are the people who are interested in their brand. And frankly, it's going to slow down. It's not going to be the same thing. And that's a problem. It's not just a problem in China. It's a problem all over the world. Maybe perhaps not India, which is really growing, but not for long.
Well, Eric, you mentioned the problems, and they are there because last week Apple did forecast its first revenue drop in 13 years. It posted the slowest ever increase in iPhone shipments. iPad unit sales down by 25% in the last quarter. Mac sales down 4%. Apple shares down 9% year to date, about 20% year over year. Eric, Apple is in trouble here?
I think investors know Apple is in trouble. I mean, I've been saying this for some time, Michelle, and in fact, when I look at Apple, it reminds me of looking at the estate of Steve Jobs and managing the estate of Steve Jobs, no different than how people are managing the estate of Elvis Presley. The problem for Elvis Presley, he hasn't had a hit for 20 years, and it's because he's dead. Steve Jobs was the driver for Apple. They have not had a hit since his death. I mean, the iPhone really was a Steve Jobs invention. Apple Music, when you look at Apple Music, failure. You look at Apple TV, watered down, failure. Look at Apple Watch, failure. They have big problems.
Well, Eric, what about rumors of this Apple car that could be on the horizon?
You know, apparently the guy that was running the Apple car now has left the business. So I think that's a big question mark. I really do. I think, and frankly, that's a tough business. So if they do get into it, I'm very skeptical in terms of when that would even come out, what it would be like. I don't see that on the near-term horizon. Even though there's rumors about it, forget about it. I think that's a real long-term project.
Well, Eric, there has been tremendous concern about Apple's ability to innovate in the post-Steve Jobs era. That is a very valid point. But in terms of services, Apple's base of installed devices has now passed 1 billion. There are so many services that Apple is offering, from music to Apple Pay. Should it be transitioning its business model accordingly?
Yes, that would be the smart move. If they're really smart, they're going to take this 1 billion number of people that are really installed base around the world, and they're going to monetize it. Now, unfortunately, they really haven't monetized it well. Apple Music has not been that successful, but iTunes certainly is. So if the future of Apple, I think, given the fact that they haven't been able to show great innovation on the product side, is to tap this huge base, monetize it, and hopefully they will. That's the hope for investors, and that's where hopefully they're going to be able to get traction. But we haven't really seen it in significant ways yet.
Well, we'll see what Apple has to say at its press event March 15th. All right, thank you so much, Eric Shiffer, CEO of Patriarch Equity.